Everybody, my name's Katie Fallon. I'm the Programmes Assistant at the UK Bureau of Reporters Without Borders. So Reporters Without Borders, I was trying to think of the best way to start off. I guess we're very much like of the Without Borders ethos. We have 13 offices worldwide and our headquarters in Paris. And we also have offices in London, Rio, Washington, and a network of correspondents in 130 countries. So we're quite light on our feet in the sense that in many countries we may not have a bureau or a section, but we've got somebody on the ground kind of letting us know what the climate's like there for freedom of information and freedom of the press. So just kind of to give a quick overview of freedom of information and freedom of press as a thematic, I thought I'd show you one of our resources that we produce, which is the World Press Freedom Index, and we display it as a map, so to have some visualization of all these borders that we're talking about. So you can see it, I think that's the English side. So depending on the colour, you can see the key there at the bottom. Black would be kind of the lowest on the index, and then white would be the best. We rank each country, so I think we have I'm trying to think, about 100. If I know exactly how many countries in the world, I'd be able to tell you. We rank every country each year, and the index comes out in April. So you can keep an eye out for next year's one in 2019. But one of the reasons I think that makes RSF really interesting and why I like working for them is because each country is included in that index. So it's not the case that anyone kind of manages to get away without being looked at. So the UK Bureau, we're only 2 people, and what we do mostly is advocacy and awareness raising in the UK, but it ties in with the global work that we also have. So particularly we're based in London. It's an incredibly good spot both to lobby government, but also because of the network of media that's in London from all over the world. So I was going to say as well that kind of in England, I suppose, or the UK, we're number 40 on the Press Freedom Index, which is actually quite low considering the quality of journalism that comes out of the UK, and it'd be one of the best known for its journalist output. But that's because what we're looking at when we rank, when we do the press index, and also kind of what we generally as an organisation are concerned with. It's not just being able to say something, but it's also pluralism. So is there diversity of voices, independence from either political or business interests, the environment and the degree to which people self-censor, the legislative framework in the country and how that facilitates freedom of information, freedom of expression, abuses and violence. So that kind of seems quite obvious, but it's not the only one. I think that's important to kind of take into account when I'm talking about the index. Transparency of the organisations producing the information, and also infrastructure available in the country. So I think a nice way, or an awful way to kind of show that relationship is, for instance, kind of in America, they've got some of the most, I suppose, liberal freedom of expression laws. You can say quite a lot, but then if you look at kind of Trump's tweets on journalists and how he describes them, that impacts where they'll come in the ranking. And it's the same for the UK. Although the quality of the journalism is really excellent, there's a lot of other things to take into account, including legislative framework. Counter-terrorism law, for instance, really impacts on freedom of expression. So all these things kind of have to be taken in one holistic view. So I think that's another way that we kind of work without borders. It's not just us looking at other countries, it's us looking at ourselves. So that would be kind of where we focus our advocacy on those kind of issues. So looking at the UK to see kind of what legislation is coming through and picking bits and collaborating with other NGOs to put out statements and particularly particular politicians themselves, lords, MPs, and raising our concerns. So that would be our advocacy, and we do awareness raising campaigns as well. A lot of those are kind of more global in reach because we're a small office here. We just kind of push those two. And then we do protests as well in London. So we're outside the Saudi embassy once a month with a group of other NGOs and any concerned citizens who'd like to join. And we also, this year in London, we had our Press Freedom Awards. So that was something that I was really involved in. It was the first time it was ever held outside of Strasbourg. So we had each of our winners. So they were 3 different international journalists, one from India, one from the Philippines, and one from Malta. And we also had a special UK prize this year, which went to Carol Cadwaller, who works for The Guardian and The Observer, She's did the story on Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, and voting, so she's like a really worthy winner. And that was great to have the attention both on our winners who were from outside the UK and the UK media. And I guess that would be one of our strategies by using the UK and London to kind of facilitate pushing the stories of people from other places. And I guess one of the other last things I wanted to talk about was more the global side. So recently we have launched an Information and Democracy Commission. So this was kind of based on the Paris side. We brought together 25 international experts from a variety of fields. So kind of some of the bigger names would have been like Joseph Stiglitz or Amartya Sen, Navi Pillay, who's the former Human Rights Commissioner, together, and they launched this little international declaration on information and democracy. So I have a few copies of the maps and this, and I'll leave them over here if anyone wants to pick them up. And I guess what's really interesting about that is not just without borders in the kind of geographical sense, but borders in terms of different, I guess, disciplines. So it wasn't just having journalists talk about freedom of information, it was having economists, it was having technology experts like data analysts, because as things move forward and as information and technology changes, these kind of groups of people need to be brought together to discuss kind of what we're going to do about them. I remember at our kind of most recent team building weekend, or it was during the week actually, a couple of months ago, our deputy director mentioned, in 10 years we don't know if we'll definitely still have newspapers anymore, and in 20 years it's very hard to guess what they look like. So I suppose that's another kind of without borders, how we actualize it, I suppose, is not just focusing narrowly on kind of traditional notions of what journalism, information, freedom of expression, freedom of the press mean, but trying to keep up with the pace that it's changing at. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Look forward to your questions.